Welcome to the IRONMAN Insider podcast presented by Maurten. I am Matt Lieto, your host, and as you can see already or hear in a second, pretty lucky to have on this episode Coach to the Stars, Julie Dibens.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And I will say thank you again because I'm shocked. We had bets going whether or not this was actually going to happen because Julie likes to kind of keep to herself, more or less. Not a lot of podcasts. I was like kind of proud. I'm like, oh, I think it's the first podcast. And I saw that you've done some other podcasts.
There's a couple.
I think they were like, some of the podcasts you've been in, they're pretty good at like reaching out constantly. Is that what I need to work on?
Yeah, like I think being a little bit more persistent.
Okay, more persistent. But point being, we're excited that you came here. And I think I pulled a big I owe you one card. Or maybe you've owed me for a while, and I can't remember when that happened. Maybe that's why I can't remember. I don't know. Something, I'm sure. Yeah. But me and Julie have some history. We raced together for a while. We're on the same team way back in the day. A couple years.
Like, was it 14 years?
Yeah, 14 years ago. And was it 3 years probably on that team?
I think 2 to 3. Yeah. Where I feel like it was good.
What happened after that, Julie?
Well, no, like I feel like it just kind of disintegrated, right?
It went downhill a little bit, yeah. I stopped pulling my weight. I never pulled my weight. And then it all just kind of fell apart. But no, it was a kind of a unique era in triathlon where there were like a few teams, right? We don't really see the teams anymore, do we? There's a few. But I feel like it was kind of groundbreaking when the Trek Case was team. Yeah.
Like, and it was, like, I have such fond memories of those 2 years.
Yeah.
Of just, like, I feel like those were our best 2 years of racing. Everybody on the team.
Yeah, you're totally right,
actually.
Ways. Yeah.
And we just kind of fed off each other, and it was such a unique group of misfits in many ways.
Yeah.
But we made it work.
We were definitely misfits.
Yeah.
Who was the biggest misfit?
Yoder.
That's totally true.
Sorry, Yoder.
He only made it 1 year, so he was pretty misfitty.
I feel like maybe it was a year and a half.
He might have made it a year and a half. He was pretty misfitty. Joe Gambles was kind of a misfit back then.
Yeah, he still is.
A little bit, yeah. But he was a cocky misfit then. He was not really cocky anymore, I don't think.
No, he's not.
But no, I do think it was unique, and I think the reason why, I'm glad you said that, now that I think of it, it was a lot of our best years.
Yeah.
Because we actually were a team, where I think now there's some quote-unquote teams, but they don't really like function as that socially, right?
Yeah, no, I don't really know what made it work so well.
I think it was you.
It definitely wasn't me. We just had fun, and yeah, like I think back on those years so fondly, like of like the friendships. And that's why I'm here, Matt. Like it's for you.
I know.
But I do like Fraser, like everybody in that team. Yeah, like I feel like, and I've said this before, like if I needed you guys, like you guys have got my back.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think honestly, part of the reason I think the team was successful and had that feeling was because of you and probably my brother. Is there was kind of like, it was obvious who were, except for Joe.
He doesn't need to hear that.
I know. He's not going to listen. He doesn't listen to stuff I do. Except for Joe, everybody knew the pecking order, right? Like there was like, oh, the mentors, like we all looked up to you guys, and like you guys were very gracious and like kind of helping the rest of us along. And I pick on Joe, but it's kind of true.
Well, like I feel like the silent one in the group was Mikey.
Raylard.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
he definitely had his best years, those years, right?
Yes. Or just before. But yeah, those 2 years.
Because he won 70.3 Worlds right before it kind of started. Yeah.
And I will say my favorite memories of the team, and actually I had Matt Hansen, one of your clients, on last week, and he says that, you still go on the bike rides and you still he says you sit in the back and then get everybody at the end. I don't know that I believe that. I believe that you're on the front probably more than that. But, we're talking Michael Raylor, Chris Lieto, Fraser Cartmill, Joe Gambles, Heather Jackson, Leslie.
Yeah.
And Yoder, and you drilled us constantly on the bike. Like you dropped me so many times on rides, like up Latigo, just like, Julie's just tearing me apart right now. Yeah, dude, you totally
I think I
did.
just kind of hung in there. It just kind of hung in there,
Yeah,
and then
it felt different to me. But that's okay.
I do remember climbing when we did the camp at the Monolani,
Yes.
right? And I don't know when you climb up to Waimea.
Yep.
Yeah.
You that was where I was at from Hawaii up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you dropped me pretty hard on that one. You remember.
Yeah, of course I do.
That's amazing. But a lot of people now, I think it's interesting, and you know this as an athlete, but triathlon, our memory is like pretty short, right? And even as athletes, it's pretty short. Like how many times I have athletes that are like, I wish I just need to know I'm a good athlete. I'm like, you won like 6 weeks ago. Like,
right.
What are you doing, right?
Yeah.
But with the sport as it's changing, people kind of forget history. And for those that don't know, Julie was, as we said, a great athlete, was on the best team ever. But I was even reminded of some of your results when I have to like look at Wikipedia just to make sure I'm not wrong in anything. But I was there when you won Ironman Coeur d'Alene in 2011.
Yep.
You won by like 10K, I think. I remember you're like, how big is the gap? And I'm like, see that peninsula way over there?
I had a bit of a scare there though.
Yeah, did your calf go or something?
No, like I got my nutrition totally wrong.
Oh, you bonked like crazy.
So I bonked really bad.
That.
It had like a really big lead, and it was like, you can't lose this race.
That's what it was. I remember you, when you get really bonky, or all of us, when we get bonky, most of us get like pretty emotional.
Yeah.
And you were like, where? I'm like, no, turn around and look. You see the other side of the lake? That's where they are. But that was just one that I remembered. And then Xterra Worlds, you won 3 times, 4 times?
3 times.
3 times?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Did you enjoy that discipline?
I loved it. I never really thought of myself as a Xterra athlete.
Yeah.
But it definitely, after doing ITU for the whole start of my career, like for 7 years, Xterra gave me the love of the sport back.
Red. And a lot of people don't know that you came from an ITU background either. And you went to one Olympics, right?
Yeah, so I qualified for Sydney, but I got injured right before, and then I competed in Athens.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, super cool. Especially like obviously with the Olympics coming up shortly, like I have a lot of, because it is forever ago, a lot of memories coming back.
Is that still like so much of sport in general, especially endurance? It feels like, if you tell somebody you're training, like it's like either do you do Ironman or, oh, you're great at this, or you're going to try to go to the Olympics. Like the Olympics is like this thing. Does it feel like that thing in the rearview mirror still?
I think probably not as big as it was when I was living it.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of, as is often the case, which is really sad, a lot of infighting and politics with the selection. So I definitely had a bit of a bitter taste about the Olympics afterwards, and it's taken me a while to kind of get the love back for it.
But you'll be watching in a couple weeks?
Yeah, for sure.
It's in like a couple weeks, right? Or is it in like a week?
A week.
Crazy.
Yeah, Friday's the opening ceremony.
Whoa, that came up quick.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, Olympics, people didn't know that. Ironman world champs, 3rd?
Yeah.
You almost had it. Almost had it.
Depends who you talk to.
You almost had it. Rinny never thought you had it.
No. She gave me the pat on the butt as she ran by.
The pat on the butt is genuine and such a mind game at the same time. Really? Hey, thanks for coming out.
Yeah, I should just put my foot out and tripped her.
Who was between you two, that one?
Carolyn Steffen.
That's right.
Yeah.
I just saw her last month in Cairns.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
How's she doing?
Seems well.
Yeah. Two kids now?
She had one with her. I can confirm one.
Yeah.
But I think 2's right.
Yeah.
And then 70.3 world champ. Once?
Yes.
09?
Yes.
Did you not come close in Vegas as well?
No.
You didn't? I thought you did.
No, I didn't.
I believe you. I was really hopeful. I was your teammate, so I was really hopeful that you
I wanted
were going
to.
That and the '09 was Clearwater, yeah.
Yeah, the last year in Clearwater.
That was what do we think about? Like, I think that was a love-hate course. Like, I didn't love it because it was so flat, but obviously you had great races there.
Yeah, I actually raced there. I forget if it was 3 times before or 2 times. So it took me, like, obviously that 3rd time to actually crack it. But I thought it was a good course. Like, it was hard to manage the drafting.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, I don't know. Were you racing in '09?
I don't know if I raced that year, but I raced Clearwater 2 times at least.
So they started the women first.
Oh, I don't know that I raced that year.
Yeah, and so I don't think they fully thought through the timing of it. So I had like a 4-minute lead, and then the men's group caught like the next group of women, and then my lead went to like a minute and a half.
Oh, no way. Yeah.
And then they caught me.
Yeah.
And then like I remember Jimmy riding up next to me. He's like, "Julie, you gotta let them go," because I'm like just riding in the group.
Yeah, totally.
He's like, "Julie, you gotta let them go."
You're like, the gap was 4, it went to 1.5. I'm going to take 2.5 minutes.
So I got it back up to 4 minutes.
It's a bit. Jimmy's going to have us cut this out of the podcast. Okay. You don't have that kind of power, Jimmy. That's amazing. So now that we've got a little established of why you obviously have great experience, and we'll talk more about your coaching specifically down the road, but what do you think has, we will say, Julie loves cookies, so I got her some cookies. They're kind of dry, so we have some fluid. So if you hear crunching and slurping, it's Julie likes cookies. Let's just let it go.
And then you just need a little bit of
just a little
fizzy water.
Yeah, got to have it, spicy water. What do you think has changed in 70.3 Worlds racing since then? Because it was like pretty new. Like that was a new discipline. I can't remember the exact year, but it couldn't have been before '06. That
I think '06 was the first year.
Was it? Yeah. You're okay. Which did Rennie win that first year? Sam McGlone.
Sam McGlone, I think.
That's right. Yeah. So what do you think's changed in that, like how the race develops and the type of athletes maybe that succeed there versus then?
Well, it's obviously got more competitive and faster. So the whole dynamics of the race has changed.
Okay.
And there's more depth. You know, like we got to see that last year, especially with the men's.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think it's like more depth? It seems like more depth from in all the disciplines, right? Like, did you probably have a gap out of the water?
Yeah.
And nowadays, like nobody's coming out with a gap, really.
Taylor.
Like a little one.
I just had a little one.
Did you? Okay.
Sometimes like that probably made my race because then I was gone.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, specifically in the men's, like nobody was going to predict who won.
No, not last year, which is, I don't know. I think it's cool, right?
Yeah,
like,
no, I think it's super cool.
Like I think Bogan, you look at that and, people say, some people didn't show up, some people were sick, but man, to me, the beauty of sport is, especially clearly had won a race before that to get his spot. So he deserved to be there.
Yeah.
And sport is like, you give him the playground and whoever comes out on top is going to win. Right. And like the way that race developed, specifically talking about that, it really, once the race was an hour in, it was clear it was going to be somebody from that front group.
Right.
And that was it. And normally a swim doesn't really decide who's going to win a race like that.
Yeah, I think especially in the men's, like you just can't have a weakness now. And it makes it so exciting, I think, that there's so many people that have the potential to win.
Right.
And you don't even know. Like the women's isn't quite there yet, and Taylor seems in some ways pretty dominant. It depends, obviously, who shows up.
Yeah.
But in the men's, like I love that. Is it Rico?
Yeah, Rico Bogan.
Rico.
Yeah.
Came out and just blew everybody away, right? Like nobody was expecting that.
Totally. And is it also different? And I'd be curious on your thoughts on this and input as a coach. Like it seems like in looking at some of the men's races too, like on the Ironman side of things, there's more of the, you bring up Taylor, like she's kind of dominating, right? And you know she's going to be there. And like in Kona, you know Lucy's going to be there. Like you know who's going to be there. Where like you didn't know Sam Lieto was going to be there. And is part of it all this talent, and part of it, it seems like the younger athletes are just like, let's just go as hard as possible and see if it sticks. Where I feel like back in the day at World Champs, it was like the vets that were the ones that were the favorites, and they were like racing a race they knew that they could do, where it was less like throw it against the wall, and if I drop out at mile 2, it's fine.
Yeah, I think there was some kind of like a combination of fear and respect for the Ironman distance.
Yeah.
And I think in the last, since Gustav and Christian came on, like, yeah, they've upped the level so far. And you can argue with Lucy as well. Mm-hmm. Like, I think they still respect Ironman. You'd be stupid not to, but you're just seeing really what is possible and then tie in the advances in technology and just how, especially on the bike, like I feel like when, again, bringing it back to the Trek K-Swiss days, like we were, because Chris was big on pushing that side of things and using that as one of his weapons. Mm-hmm. But not many people were looking into CDA and going into the wind tunnel back then. And now it seems like you can't perform at the highest level if you don't have all of that dialed.
No, and I look back at that part of my career and I'm like, oh man, I kind of got lucky. Like Chris was like maybe the only triathlete that was going into the wind tunnel.
Yeah.
And I was using some of that information and just happened to have an aero position like a couple of years that was good. And I'm like, why did I suck the last couple of years? Like, oh no, because you weren't doing all the stuff. But yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. But on the women's side, like if you've got, is that what it takes? Does it take like a Lucy and a Taylor for then the other women, if they want to be a part of the conversation, do they need to start like throwing it against the wall and seeing if it sticks? Like, is that where the jump is going to happen? Like, obviously those athletes are more established. They know that they can depend on that. Does that mean for them to get beaten, people are going to have to take more risks? Or is it going to be like in 5 years when that talent has 5 more years of experience, they're going to be able to beat them?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I almost feel like Lucy and Taylor like are a little bit ahead of their time, you know? And you always get an influx of people after the Olympic year, right?
Okay, yeah.
Coming into long course racing, being 70.3 in Ironman. But yeah, and I think still in the women's, like we don't have the same knowledge like with aerodynamics. Like I don't think there's enough women going into the tunnel and looking at all the fine details like the men are doing yet. And I don't know if that's due to sponsorship funding or the women don't really fully understand the benefits of it. But like you see it at the very top level, like with Lucy and Taylor and some of the others. But I think as you go further down into like the mid-pack, they're not necessarily fully dialed in.
Oh, totally. And I'm glad you said that because it's been somewhat obvious for a few years. And like 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of the positions of the best women were like, really?
Yeah.
That's what you're running?
And like you look at the men now and you can't compete unless you're fully dialed. Yeah. Like with equipment position, everything. And the women seem to be getting away with it a little bit. And at some point that's going to shift.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm really curious and like totally random thoughts, but like, what do we think that is? Like for me, part of it's like, man, it's because men are like over, at least the men I know are like over like my brother.
Yeah.
Sometimes like self-involved in that. And like the only thing they see is this. And so they're going to dissect and overthink every portion of that. And are women not doing that? Or am I like totally off base? Cause it has been such a, like we'd seen the men and the aerodynamics and then the men and the group tactics. And now we're starting to see more of the women in the group tactics and more of the women with better aerodynamics. And I'm just, it's curious to me. And I think good point that it could be sponsored dollars of what that is.
I do think some of it is coming from that or the lack of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because you have to have a bike sponsor that's willing to, and like these days, you don't really have to go to the wind tunnel to
Right.
get everything out of it, but you got to have maybe some support to do that.
Yeah, like I even think of Matt Hansen, and I know that some of the stuff that he's always doing, tinkering
Yeah.
with his position and checking his CDA. Like I don't. Maybe there's women doing that. I don't know of any
Yeah.
that are like self-testing. Yeah, like
Yeah.
going on the track and
And I wonder if it'll be if it's like a critical mass at some point, right? Like the men kind of, as you said, you can't be competitive unless you are. So will it be to the point where, like, if you look at like Ruth Assel, she is so aerodynamic,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she's got great numbers as well. But like, you're like, okay, that's a lot of the reason she's someone that we're talking about is because she's that dialed. And she is a tinkerer. Like she messes
Yeah.
with that stuff.
no, and I know, like I work pretty closely with Matt Bottrell,
Yeah.
which has been awesome, like for probably the last 10 years. But I know more and more people are reaching out to either Matt or somebody else in
Yeah.
that field. And I hear of more women doing it. But again, it's an investment, right? Like I know Lisa Norden went over recently
Yeah.
and spent a lot of time. But yeah, like you got to have the dollars to be able to do that.
And she looked good before,
Right.
right? Like she's always, not always, but for a while. Looked
Yeah, because
really
how many
good.
times did she win the Swedish national time trial? Like 2 or 3?
At least twice.
Yeah.
And like Paula Finley looks really good.
Right.
Right. She's won the TT and it tinkers a little bit more than probably
Yeah.
the rest. So that has something to do with it. And what do you think that, like, from the work you've done with Bottrell, and I know like you nerd about the stuff and it's very like vague, but from like a reasonable position to a great position, like what kind of time do you think an athlete like that is actually saving?
Oh,
I know it's more efficiency, but
yeah. I'm not the right person.
Just
to
say
ask.
27 minutes.
26 minutes.
Dude, that's a lot of time, Julie. I had no idea. Breaking news.
But it's a lot. Like
Yeah.
when you start adding up all the details, like the tires, yeah, everything.
There you go. Super, super important. So you obviously focus on that or facilitate your athletes being able to go to somebody that is like super dialed on that. Coaching in general, did you always know that you'd move to coaching after being an athlete?
I suspected I would.
Yeah.
Like I got a degree in exercise physiology.
Yeah.
And I definitely had an interest, like whether I was going to go into more of like the sports science side or coaching, I wasn't sure.
That was a master's degree, right?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Julie's humble, so I got to make sure it's on there. Because I do think it's important because like there are also like hacks like me that it's like,
we're all hacks.
I know, but it's like, oh, crazy, you've retired from triathlon and now you coach, like shocker. But like you actually have the knowledge, you know.
We all fake it.
What did I say about her being humble? I also have this plate of cookies
Yeah, I
that I
know.
got for Julie.
They do look a little dry.
I didn't make them. I'll bake my own next time. They're gluten free. I apologize for that. And I know it you can barely hear it. It seemed like the move to coaching was pretty successful, pretty quick. Like having a podcast with Matt Hansen last week, like you've been coaching him for what, like 12 years or something?
Is it that long?
So I can't remember, but it was like way longer than I thought.
Yeah, like I feel like I got super lucky with the timing,
Okay.
right? Like I was, after I raced Kona in 2011, I had like foot and knee surgery, and that was kind of the end of my career. I tried to make a comeback in 2014, which was the same time that Tim Don moved to Boulder.
Okay.
And so he was really the first pro that asked me to coach him.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and so the timing was perfect because I was trying to race but ended up being done. And he had just asked. And so just built like a little squad around him initially. And then just, yeah, over time, things just kind of grew.
And obviously had pretty good success with him.
Yeah, like he came in with obviously a lot of talent, ITU world champion.
Yeah.
And it was just a case of getting his feet under him in the 70.3 distance, which took a little while.
Yeah.
But yeah, he went on to do great things. And he was actually the one that introduced me to Matt Bottrell, because at a point in my coaching with him, he wanted to bring Matt on to help with the cycling.
Yeah.
And that's just it's been awesome, like having Matt or being able to work with him. Like, I think it's super important as coaches to have like a team around you, and we challenge the way each other thinks, and we have the ability to leave the ego aside and figure out what's best for the athlete, which I think is key if you're working with other coaches.
Oh, totally. And I think the biggest thing, or I don't know, a red flag on a coach is if they think that they can find the answer to everything, right? Like if they're doing your weight training and they're doing your aerodynamics and they're doing everything else, it's like probably outsourcing is going to be something that's pretty important if you're trying to squeeze everything out of the lemon.
Yeah, like that's definitely my philosophy. And I think it works. Like, if anything, sometimes I wish I had more confidence, right? And didn't outsource as much as I do. Because sometimes I think when you've been in the sport as long as we have, we forget what we know because we've just been around it for so long.
Totally, for sure. And I appreciate that, obviously, because I think we're both somewhat humble people. People would be shocked to hear me say that I think I'm humble. But having that, if you're calling it quote unquote lack of confidence, means that you question yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest, I guess that's more what I'm saying, is if you have a coach that doesn't question themselves, they're probably filling in some blanks that they're not educated on.
And I think having the opportunity to work with some of the pros that I have, I don't want to mess it up.
Totally. There's an obligation.
And so, like I might have ideas, but I want reassurance that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're probably pretty similar. And you lose sleep if somebody gets injured too, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
It's the worst.
I lose sleep over the stupid things. Yeah.
I actually got a new sleeping program. I'll let you. Yeah, I got a new eye mask. I got stuff. Yeah, a little sound machine.
White noise.
Right now I'm in a babbling brook.
Oh.
Yeah.
There you go.
I got to get up in the middle of the night more often, but that's okay. I digress. No, I think that's super important and wise. And so I think anytime we see someone that has great success as an athlete or a coach, they've had mentors or people that they looked up to and respected. For you on the coaching side of things, what or who was that?
So in my ITU days, a guy called Richard Hobson, British coach, he coached me through most of my ITU career. And he still is, just a very softly spoken.
Okay.
Very rarely did he need to yell at me or encourage me. It's just this is what we do.
Okay.
And we definitely had a nice friendship there as well. And then after him, I was self-coached for a long time, but I think I learned so much from just being around other athletes, and just seeing what worked and what doesn't.
Yep.
With the guys on the team, guys and girls on the team, and then just being here in Boulder, having the opportunity to train with so many great people, always just observing, not just the training, but just the attitude that goes with it. I would say Dave Scott influenced me a little bit, going to some of his swim sessions. He did coach me for a year when I was trying to make a comeback, but more just his presence on the pool deck and just how everybody wanted to be there just to get the work done. Yeah.
And did that foundation of you growing up, because you were on the swimming track, right?
Yep.
Did that atmosphere influence you as an athlete and as a coach?
I'm sure it definitely influenced my discipline as an athlete. I think oftentimes you hear of that swimming, you have to be pretty disciplined to get all the work done in the pool. So that definitely impacted me as an athlete. As a coach, I swam at LSU. That wasn't in the Wikipedia notes.
Yeah, it was.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
LSU.
Okay.
You know, I think that my good buddy Aaron is a big LSU, so I can't forget.
Okay.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. There you go. Thank you. One of the coaches that we had, like I wasn't a great swimmer. I was good enough to be on the team.
Yeah.
And he definitely favoritized the better athletes. And so now, after that, I've tried to just treat everybody the same, no matter the ability. As long as you're committed and you want to work hard, I'm going to coach you as best I can.
That's awesome. That also just means you're a good person.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. That was on the Wikipedia page.
What, I'm a good person?
The good person, yeah.
Aww.
It's right at the top. Good person. Make paper noises. There you go. No, that's awesome. And it's not that easy to do. And one of the things I've appreciated about you as a coach and a human is partly the fact that you don't want to go on podcasts necessarily tells a bigger picture where I think we've all seen it, and I'm clearly not going to point out any names, but in triathlon, and I'm sure in other sports, once a coach gets some success, it starts being about that success, and to some extent that coach's ego around that success and the bigger athletes. And you see it time and time over again, right? Where the good athletes get the attention. If a new good athlete comes in the squad, they get the attention, and the vibe and the kind of society that's been made in that group changes. And you've always kind of put the Heisman to that, right? You don't seem like an ego-driven coach at all.
Yeah, and I think that was just because I was probably on the other end of that in my swimming career.
Yeah.
I don't always get it right, but it's something that is important to me.
Good. Well, I appreciate that. And I know your athletes do. And obviously having athletes that have been with you for as long as someone that Hansen has.
It is kind of, I was thinking just the other day, I have been super lucky in how loyal, in some ways, some of the athletes are to me.
Yeah.
Which has been great. Challenging at times.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, if they're on a long ride, they don't know who's going to do the polls if you're not around, right? Keep the pace up.
I feel like those days are behind me.
I don't believe you. So those are things that you're getting right. I'm curious because we're going to have, a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, some people listening to this podcast, but of varying abilities. Some people maybe doing their first Ironman, some people that have been doing it for a long time. What do most of us get wrong? I know that's a very broad question. But I mean, Ironman training takes a lot of that discipline, and let's assume that we have that we're going to go do stuff when we're told or when we think we have to. But what process or part of our training do a lot of us maybe look at in the wrong way?
Especially I would say the non-coached people. I think people get too complicated with things. So simplifying it, and people often are not patient enough, and they look for the everyday epic hit, endorphins, I was awesome today, at the sacrifice of just being patient and building slowly towards the end goal.
Oh, totally. I think that, I think we have that in common. I think anybody who coaches for long enough kind of sees those things. Actually, a lot of people don't see the complicated part. I think people like it complicated.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm talking to a new possible client, I'm like, just so you know, I'm not going to entertain you.
Right. And that's not our job.
No, it's not. And you're probably going to be annoyed that this is boring, but it's going to be boring. But the second part, what you're saying, actually kind of goes with that. And I'm actually curious if you've seen this too. I seem to have more success with women at a new pro or elite amateur level because I feel like they're generally okay with a 3 or 5 year plan. And there's patience, right? And then if they're okay with that, I'm not going to entertain you part, and then okay with the patience, it kind of takes care of itself, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think thinking of a couple of younger pros that I've worked with in the last couple of years, I think it's hard for them when they see some of the results now, with like Rico coming out,
Yeah.
relatively unknown, and they see people come onto the scene and like dominate
Yep.
pretty quickly. And it's like, well, why am I not doing that? Right. And so, but I don't know Rico's history and how long he's been training and some of these other guys. But I imagine that most people are doing work for a while.
Well, like Sam Laidlaw was doing triathlon when he was like
Exactly.
7, right? Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a good point because, my nephew is a triathlete. He's actually in town. I'm sure he said he's been swimming with you a little bit, but he's been, he has uncle and he has his dad to tell him this, but like there is that tendency to want they're doing it. They're
Right.
my age. Like I'll just work hard and like it'll come. And it's like for some people it does, but most of the time, you're missing the fact that like the Norwegians have been training together every day since they were like 12.
Right.
with each of their like 2 coaches, right? And I think that's the stuff that people underestimate. And I think how do you get past that challenge as a coach to encourage these athletes to have patience when it comes to that?
I think it's just reminding them that they have to be patient and just do the work and show them the progressions that they're making along the way. But it's hard, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's having that expectation. Like another thing I'll tell a lot of new pro clients is, and I might have told you this, but like my first year as a pro, I wrote down my goals. And
Will they be your brother?
Not the first year. He dropped out at every race I was doing better than him at. I don't know that I ever beat him. He dropped out.
Huh.
Yeah, he did. I'm thinking of the one and he dropped out. There's a few. Oh, we got technical issues, Julie.
Sorry.
She went for the cookie.
Blame the cookie.
It's good. But I wrote down, I don't know what the cursing level is on this podcast or not, but get your butt kicked. And that was one of like 5 goals. And you know what? At the end of the year, I got my butt kicked. And it was sweet. Because
What year was that?
well, I got my butt kicked more than just the one year.
What year was your first pro year?
Just kidding. Shoot. Probably like 03 or 04. But it was a lot of good things out of it is you go in and pros go in, new pros like, I call it like angel dust. They'll be like, I think maybe today's the day I'm going to wake up and do better than I've ever done in all 3 sports and I'll win the race. Yeah. And if they don't do that, they feel like something's not happening. And I never had that. I was like, I'm going to get my butt kicked. That's sweet. And at the same time, I'd be like, I'm not stressed. So I'll go strike up a conversation with Simon Lessing and Chris Lee and these guys that are like legends. And so the second year, I'm just like high five at all these guys. And then, you're like then in a spot where you're laid back and comfortable enough to like get the most out of yourself, where I think some of those pros go in, and I'd be curious to see what the average length of a professional triathlon career is, because I bet it's probably really short because there's a lot to do it for like a year or 2, and they have expectations.
Right.
And they
like I think I don't necessarily see that side. So that's
of the ones that are in and out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're a good coach.
So your first pro year.
Yeah.
Like how competitive were you?
I was probably more competitive than that like goal set. Like I made some paychecks. There was like a series in NorCal and like, I got on podium in a couple races, but I was 24 years old and just kind of screwing around. But, I was off from the front a fair bit, but kind of hung in there a little bit. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
No, like I'm curious because so many times now I see pro males come in, and some of them really struggle with the dynamic of being off the back.
Right.
Right. Like they love it because they get to race some of the best in the world, but it's a very different feeling. Right, to winning some of the age group races, to being 20 or 30 minutes back.
Totally.
And it's a hard thing for them to manage.
It really is. And I've seen it. I've been on the course and I've seen it. And I imagine that is challenging. And I think you said that it's tighter and more competitive than it was. I do think qualification was harder then, even though it was less competitive, like in the pro field. Like it wasn't quite as tight, but I think qualification was a little bit harder. And I think for me, it was, I had my brother to look up to, and to a certain extent know that like I had it in me if he was doing stuff like that.
Do you still look up to him?
Only if he's on a ladder.
Good answer.
That was a ladder joke. Really good. I got a lot of ladder jokes. But yeah, I had the ability to know that, but also I think there's kind of under the like angel dust, and I think it's fairy dust. I don't know why I say angel dust is something different, but in that same kind of mindset, you'll have new pros, and I try to remind them, they'll be like, they will have not won a lot of age group races, and then they'll be like super upset if an age grouper beats them.
Right.
And you're like, dude, literally nothing has changed except you've added more stress and expectation to yourself, right? Do you see that different on the women's side? It seems like maybe a more supportive environment, or like that is a little bit different.
Yeah, I guess I haven't been exposed to it as much. And I think it's harder for the males, especially if they're getting caught up in the women's race.
Right. Yeah.
They have to manage that dynamic as well. So I think I'm more involved in that kind of arena than some of the women that maybe are getting caught by age groupers.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. I did get caught by two women, Chrissy Wellington and Brenda Carfrey, both at world champs. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
It's
so hot out there. I'll tell this story because I think it's funny. At like mile 22, you used to know that the women were coming because I guess you still do, but we started together. So you'd hear the helicopter and be like, oh no, the helicopter is coming, right? And I see that, and I see like the, all the motorcycles and everything. I'm like, oh, here we go. And Chrissy comes up next to me and I stick my hand out for like a high five. And I'm gonna do this to you, and the listeners at home will realize this is how long it was. Give me your hand. Dude, it was about that long.
Wow.
And I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Are we running in together? Are we going like Jack and Jill? Like Jack and Jill. I'm like, we're doing it. This is great.
A moment with Chrissy.
Yeah, it was close. It was close. That was amazing too. And it's funny too, though, is like, it is, again, a mindset thing. Because I was like, and clear, like I wasn't on my best day. Not that it matters. If I was on my best day, I trust myself. I would have the same attitude. I was like, that's crazy. She is kicking ass, right? Like that appreciation is something too, but you can only have that if you set your expectations in a realistic place.
Yeah. No, and that's the key part.
Yeah. Awesome.
You're a wise man, Matt.
I learned all these things from watching you, Julie.
I thought you were going to say from your brother.
Certainly not. I think we all know who was pulled the strings of my brother's career. That's awesome. What do you think, like, improvements we've had in like metrics and technology in the last few years has made your job way easier?
I think just getting all the data, like it's cool, right? To get like, all the power, the heart rate, all of that, because we just get to learn so much more. I just wish sometimes that the athletes didn't get to see it.
Right.
So I think it's made the athlete less in tune with their instincts, and more reliant on the data. I think it's great for the coach, but sometimes for some athletes, I feel that they've lost the art.
How do you get around that? I know when we were probably some of the first people with power meters, and I know I would put like black tape over it.
Right.
Or, just ignore it. Is that even a thing that's an option anymore? Or like, how do you keep athletes from overly fixating on the numbers?
Like it's very athlete dependent. Like some of them I feel like they need it. And like I definitely tried
Yeah.
and it's like a non-starter.
Yeah.
But just trying to give them different challenges and just change the vocabulary with the workout.
Yeah.
You know, like even riding with Dee Dee today, just telling her like we're going back to RPE. Like this is what I want you to do. Like rather than chasing numbers constantly.
And that's rate of perceived exertion for those
Yes,
that
it
don't
is.
know. Yeah.
Correct.
Are you on a 1 to 10 or 1 to 20?
1 to 10.
1 to 10.
Simplify.
Yeah. There's like a 115 scale. Who does that? No, I think that's important. And I think like, I try to tell athletes like, hey, let's remember like power is one thing and it's a very important tool. But the point is to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So like, let's focus on that. Right.
Yeah. So sometimes just having them, okay, we're going to do 10 miles.
Yeah.
As fast as you can. Right.
Yeah. Totally.
Because, and yeah, like it's hard, right? Because I think people get so hung up on the power, but it's 100% what you just said. Like it's about riding from A to B as fast as possible. And how do you do that? Where do you need to lay down the power to get from A to B as fast as possible? And that might be different for different people.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it took us a while. Like when me and Chris first got power meters, I remember going to Wildflower and Jordan Rapp was staying with us. And after the race, he's like, what were you guys doing out there? I was like, oh, we got power meters. So like when we go up the hill, our goal is to hold 330 watts. So we're going to go up the hill at 330 watts. And then we go down the hill at 330 watts. And then on the flat, we go 330 watts. He's like, you guys are idiots. Like, have you ever heard of diminishing return? We're like, no. Tell us about it. And that would like obviously a lot more has gone into it, but that changed a lot of how I rode and how that point A to point B, like Jesse Thomas, when he first started riding with me, he's like, I thought we were doing 70.3 intervals. I was like, yeah. He's like, well, you were all over the place. I'm like, yeah. And I've finished like 500 meters in front of you and my average is the same.
Yeah.
You got to know how to dole it out there. Okay. What is it about the iron distance that is so difficult as a coach and like addictive as an athlete? Like, why do we all just need to get out there and prove that we can do it?
Like I think for the athlete, because it's very rare that you like have that perfect performance, in part because it's so long. Mm-hmm. But there's so many things that can impact your race. I think people are getting better at it, more consistent with it. But it's, like you hear it time and time again. I just want to do one more. I want to have like that magical
Good luck.
sub 8 hour, whatever it is, right? Yeah. And it's that carrot just stays there and people keep coming back for more. So I think that's from the athlete perspective. From the coach, what makes it hard? I guess it's the same thing. Like there's so many things that can impact your day, and you can see your athlete in training, like they're fitter than they've ever been before.
Yeah.
But they shit the bed.
Totally. That happens. I mean, I've certainly been there. And I think all you can do as a coach is give them the skills. But the other part is like trying to be an example, correct me if you think I'm wrong, I think Ironman is like a giant problem-solving contest. Because nothing ever, like the people that are winning world champs, they hear people be like, oh yeah, I did this, I dropped a chain. And they'll be like, yeah, I did that too, and I still beat you, but I'm not going to tell anybody about it, right? Like everybody's figuring out what's going on and fixing problems all day long. And it's finding a way, like is like you being on these rides with these athletes helpful with that? How do you kind of give them that toolkit of like, oh, this is what Julie would say I should do in this situation? Or
yeah, like I don't think it's necessarily that, but having them trust their instinct.
Yep.
And we do talk about, Ironman is, the winners are going to be the ones that problem solve the best. And so some of that they'll learn just from training. Don't just throw the towel in when something happens. And it's probably the biggest thing I've noticed, especially this year, just with the swim group that we have here. like the best athletes, they can get the work done no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And I see other athletes like throw in the towel sometimes, and it's like, you just got to keep going, right? And whether you teach that or that's just instinct, I don't know, but I think it's good to talk about it.
And just out of curiosity, do those tend to be the younger athletes that are throwing the towel in, or is it across the board?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, like it's maybe a cultural thing, but I think that's a good point. I've never thought of it necessarily from the training aspect then into racing, because it's whatever that challenge is that's keeping them from doing the training. Something hurts or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And a small obstacle or mental hiccup can throw them off in racing. And a big thing I found recently is reminding athletes, be like, hey, go to the list. I have new pro racing in Lake Placid tomorrow. This will be out after Lake Placid, but like, go to the results list and from the last couple of years and look at like the top 20. And like, she probably want to be top 20 or top 30. She's first year. So her goal is to get her butt kicked. She's going to. It's going to be great. And look at the difference between the places, like 15th to 20th. Like, what's that time difference? When you're on the swim and someone's 10 seconds in front of you and you're freaking out because you got dropped, or you're on the bike and somebody goes past you fast and you're like, they're 300 meters in front of me, I got to get them. It's like the small gaps don't matter, because in the end, that person's going to be 7 minutes in front of you or 7 minutes behind you. And I think it's like those kind of challenges for those athletes that don't push through, that maybe the hard parts in training, that they're like, there's just a resiliency and like that maybe that they don't have.
But I think they learn that in training too, though, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
Totally. Like
Yeah.
that's, I never thought of it that way, but yeah, if you're consistent in training and can push through, and there's certain things obviously you don't want your athletes to push through in training.
Yeah.
But training inherently, like there's a stress that you're supposed to be up against that creates a response.
Yeah, like, and I definitely remember like swimming, like it's probably the perfect example. And somebody, is putting like 5 seconds into you. And like, I'm just like so frustrated because this person's put 5 seconds into me.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter.
At all.
Right. But you see how sometimes that gets to people. And like when you're tired and in Ironman training, like I get it, like a lot of things get to us. But having the resiliency to push that out of your mind and bring it back into what you're doing. If you can't do it in training, you're not going to do it in racing.
Totally. I think that's, good point. And so many times you see that. And Coeur d'Alene one year, I always had this great thing where my legs would just cramp in the swim for no reason. And they've cramped so bad that I was in the front group. Matt Dixon pushed the pace too much and I was on him, and then I like cramped. And I get out, and Paul Interview Fraser actually announced that I had been hit by a boat because I was like dragging my leg. Like it was like that bad, right? And I had lost all this time. And I was like, whatever, man, you're going to be out here forever anyways. My first Ironman, get around and have a good result. And I remember Buddy crossing the line like 10 minutes later, and I'm like, how'd it go? And he's like, oh man, I like dropped a chain and it cost me 24 seconds. And like, he was all he was thinking about. And I like, it took me till then to remember that
right.
I had that issue.
You got hit by the boat.
It was a massive boat. It was like a tugboat. I got up in the twirly thing and thrown over the top. It's like the resiliency to be able to adapt and move forward, because it is such a long day.
Yeah, and like there's no way things are not going to happen.
No, they're always going to happen.
Yeah.
And now on a grander scale, I want to talk to you quickly. We'll let you go because I know you got to sleep for your big workout tomorrow. I don't know that, actually. I just made that up. The Pro Series is kind of added a new aspect to that, where athletes now not just on a race, but like through the season, they have to push through challenges and like find different ways to try to get as many points as possible. I know you're probably crossing your fingers that Hansen has a good race tomorrow, which will be a couple days after or before this podcast comes out. So he doesn't go to Frankfurt and race another Ironman.
No, Matt, he'll probably still do that.
Right. What do you think about that, the series and the challenges that maybe it adds for a coach, or maybe the opportunities that it adds for athletes? Because I'm thinking, two athletes that I know pretty well, spent some time with Lauren Brandon and talked to Matt, like it seems like they're thriving in this season, like I haven't seen either of them actually thrive before.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
I think the Pro Series, there's good and bad things to it, right? Like I love that they came out and there is this opportunity for people to make good money as pros. Like even compared to when we were racing, like it's just been this gradual decline. And I feel like it's, unless you're the very best of the best, it's so hard for pros to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that Ironman have come out and put up a lot of money and there's a lot of excitement first year, like nobody knows how it's going to go, who is going to show up to what races. So I love that aspect of it. And I think, especially from Matt and Maurten, they're so excited by it. And that has maybe been lacking in the last couple of years.
Right on. Yeah.
And so that's just given fuel to the fire for them.
That makes sense.
Which has been awesome. Like I do, the part I dislike about it is potentially encouraging people to race too much.
Sure.
And that obviously has its downsides. And then also just the way the points are in the race. Like when there's that much money on the line, like it's definitely going to encourage people to keep pushing all the way, which can be good, but it could be bad.
Yeah, like I think you have to have, and I joke around about Matt and more races, but it's like for me, if I had an athlete, I'm like, okay, you're going to do the series, but you're doing 3 Ironmans.
Yeah.
And we're not going to add more than that, right? Because even 3 is a lot.
Yeah, like Matt and I have talked in depth about him doing Frankfurt.
Yeah.
Right. And initially I was like, hell no. Right. But then when you think about it, and is he still leading the series or was he bumped? I think he's still leading.
He's still leading going into Placid.
Like his history in Kona hasn't been great.
No.
But regardless of that, like his last Kona was on the up. I think it was 14th or 15th.
15th, yeah.
Like if something happens, like then the series is like in jeopardy. So as much as I disagree with him going to Frankfurt, if things go well tomorrow, then the peace of mind he can get by going and just banking a decent performance in Frankfurt will take a lot of weight off his shoulders, and maybe he can finally go to Kona and have that performance that he wants.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And I'm sure you didn't listen to the podcast, but we talked about that. And like, I think he's set up, like if you look at historically, at least I have a lot of experience with training partners and buddies that struggled in Kona. And then once they got like a decent one on the board, like a 15th, like I think Hoffman was literally 15th and then second. Right. And I think Luke was something like 11th and then second. And Chris was like somewhat similar. It's like, oh, you have to have one where you're like, oh, there isn't like a voodoo doll out there that doesn't allow me to be good here. I've just kind of did it, and now I can try to push. So hopeful for him there. But yeah, I think you make good points, and I think it's another big challenge with coaches too, is like, starting the season, having a plan and trying to keep our athletes on that plan and to have the perspective stay the same, right? Like, she's gonna be mad, but like I coach Lisa Bacharis, and she had like surgery, couldn't run in January, and qualified for Worlds in her first race, won St. Anthony's, like first off the bike in her next race. And she's like, oh man, I just don't feel like are you kidding? What are you doing? You're killing it, right? And she's had some bad luck since, but it's like, it's having that, oh no, the perspective and our goals originally, like there's a reason the coach plans things a certain way, right? And I think I could see that presenting a challenge. And not that Matt is a very level-headed person. You guys are going to have good conversations about that, but I can see that being a challenge. Yeah,
so that's like, I guess, the downside to the series. But in general, like I think it's been amazing. It's
cool to see like the start list tomorrow.
Exactly. Like especially in the men's, right? Like it's bringing, and that's what we want, the best athletes to race at the bigger races for sure.
Dude, and resurgence. Like I'll tell you, the person I'm most excited about from this pro series, and I don't think I've talked to her about this. I'm sure I haven't. Dude, last year after Finland, right after the finish line, I hear Jackie Herring telling like Paula Finley, like, I think it was Paula, I think I'm retiring. Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, no, dude, like, keep on going. And she's freaking killing it. And it's like she's doing Ironman distance races where she hasn't in years. And to me, that's fun to watch someone that like was maybe that close being like revived in what you're saying, like Lauren Brandon and Matt Hansen. Like, it's cool actually seeing kind of the older guard.
For sure. And I
putting it on the
think,
board.
yeah, like it doesn't need to come down to money, but money is part of it. Like, especially the Ironman athletes, you only get to race maybe three a year, right? So it's been hard the last couple of years for them, I think, seeing some of the money disappear.
Yeah.
And yeah, this has been exciting, and hopefully it continues.
Totally. And for me, actually, when I saw the prize list, what I was most excited about, because I have loved when other entities have done this, but it's like 11th through 50th is $5,000. No, you can't survive off of that. But if you're a decent first year pro and you have the ability to do that many races, like, you're going to defer a lot of your costs. And it's cool that 50th doesn't get $300 and 11th gets $12,000 or whatever, right? Like, I kind of like how that was
like
planned out.
that's always, I think, the part, like, the best of the best are doing okay.
Yeah, they are. They really are. That's amazing. Okay, do you have one JD Crew tip for athletes that are listening, they're training for their next Ironman, that they can use for this next week or two in training?
One tip.
Something to think about, maybe perspective on their next race, or again, something that we tend to do wrong in training.
I think just coming back to that conversation of just like how we can get so hung up on 3 or 5 seconds that somebody might be putting into you, or whatever it is, a training buddy riding away from you.
Yeah.
Just like bring it back internal and focus on you and what you need to get done.
I think that's really good advice, because all of us, I was never a world champion, far from it. You were, but there's always that term, that world champion trainer. And that world champion trainer never had any results. Not very often. Not very often. Well, thank you, Julie, very much for coming on.
Thank you.
I'll slide you this $100 bill underneath the table.
Thank you.
It's in the form of a cookie.
Cookie was not good.
It was not a good cookie. I didn't make it. Next time I'll make it. I've got some great cookies.
Yeah.
I promise. You going to be in Nice and Kona, or one of the two?
I don't think so.
Neither.
Yeah.
And you
First
don't get
time.
any of my
I
cookies.
know. Maybe I'll come.
I'll bring you some cookies. But no, appreciate you coming on very much.
Thanks for having me.
And if you all enjoyed today's conversation, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you're on the trainer, you can actually watch us on our Ironman Triathlon YouTube channel as well. And to keep up with all the latest Ironman Pro Series news, follow at Ironman Tri on Instagram, and check out proseries.ironman.com for standings, athlete bios, episodes of A Fighting Chance, replays of races, and more. And again, we don't have to, but I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, Maurten, the official sports performance nutrition partner of Ironman Global Series. Couldn't have this podcast and these great conversations without y'all at Maurten. So thank you so much for your support. And thank you all for listening in to the Ironman Insider. And can't wait to get more great conversations with you as the series moves on. I'm Matt Lieto. Thanks so much for listening.